Inspector General's testifying on Capitol Hill. We also have the Attorney General saying, not so fast, libs. This report isn't the end of whether or not the spying on Trump was illicit and perhaps illegal. We'll get into that. Plus, we know who Time Magazine's Person of the Year is. We've got so much more coming up on the Buck Sexton Show.
I think our nation was turned on its head for 3 years. I think based on a completely bogus narrative that was largely fanned and hyped by an irresponsible press. And I think that there were gross abuses of FISA and inexplicable behavior that is intolerable in the FBI. In one area, I do disagree with the IG, and that was whether there was sufficient predication to open a full-blown counterintelligence investigation, specifically using the techniques that they did to collect intelligence about the Trump campaign. The greatest danger to our free system is that the incumbent government use the apparatus of the state, principally the law enforcement agencies and the intelligence agencies, both to spy on political opponents, but also to use them in a way that could affect the outcome of the election. And I think when you step back here and say, what was this all based on? It's not sufficient. The core statement, in my opinion, by the IG is that these irregularities, these misstatements, these omissions were not satisfactorily explained. The question really is, what was the agenda after the election that kept them pressing ahead after their case collapsed? This is the President of the United States.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, friends. That was Attorney General Barr with some very important comments that everyone needs to keep in mind right now, given the unbelievable mendacity of the press, the willingness to skip past what has happened here. Oh, that's right, the Inspector General that the media has been telling us, of course, is so trustworthy and great because he didn't completely annihilate every aspect of their narrative. Just the fact that the Steele dossier was a fraud. Carter Page did nothing wrong. Enormous mistakes, tremendous blunders. And we'll get into whether they were just mistakes in a minute. But the only thing they don't really have quite yet is somebody from the FBI saying, you know what? Let's abuse the investigative process. Let's weaponize FISA against a presidential campaign, signed Agent so-and-so, sending to Agent so-and-so with a declaration and signature at the bottom. That's basically all they're missing. But to protect the institution of the FBI, they're willing to say, we don't know. We couldn't get an explanation for it. I have some explanations to offer up today to you here on the show. It was stunning. I saw Carter Page last night. I was at Fox News. I had a nice chat with Carter. We've always gotten along very well. I know that Carter is now about to embark on a series of lawsuits. I hope that Carter Page becomes a very, very wealthy man as a result of those lawsuits, because he deserves to be. Not the $19 billion level wealthy that was written in the dossier. Again, a dossier that only morons could believe was true, and that was never verified, and that people from the most elite media institutions across the lib spectrum kept pretending was mostly true, had not been discredited. How many times have you heard this? By the way, I have to hat tip some of my friends in conservative media. Sean Davis has been a beast on this one. Molly Hemingway, also fantastic, both of them at the Federalist, among others, who are just going around and pulling out old tweets of these idiotic, dishonest frauds who are very well-paid journos with big platforms at NBC and CNN and the New York Times, saying things that are just, now we know, flatly untrue. Do you sense any apology coming from them? Do you sense any of them coming forward to say, wow, we really missed this one? And let's all keep this in perspective. They're trying to just whistle past this one like nothing has happened. What did happen, beyond any reasonable doubt, is the weaponization of law enforcement against the presidential campaign of Donald Trump and the continuation of that weaponization past his actual election victory for reasons that the FBI admits are utterly inexplicable to them. I do not think they are inexplicable to us. I think we all know. My friends, if somebody in the law enforcement community decides that they have their suspect, they have their person, they know that they don't have to do a lot to keep it going. They know that they don't have to change that much in order to get that one last warrant to search the person's home or to get that arrest warrant to bring them in. And if they're willing to break the rules, if they're willing to stack the deck, as I like to say, all it takes is, drop a little DNA here, drop a firearm there, whatever it may be. Place some prints on the murder weapon. You all watch detective shows, you know. And that's an egregious misconduct, right? That violates the oath of that law enforcement officer and violates the law. Now, we are told, for example, and I would like someone to explain this to me, and I know that they can't. That's why I put out that challenge. I also know they better keep these little MSNBC, CNN, national security experts, all these other people that have built careers. Somebody wrote a book called Proof of Collusion. The guy's an idiot. There is no proof of collusion. Do you think he's going to retract that one? I challenged him to a debate once. That was funny. He goes, I would never deign to debate somebody who actually worked in the intelligence community, has some idea what he's talking about. Clown. And none of them take any accountability for this. None of them care that they were lying about this in many cases, or that they ran with something that it is unfathomable that they really could believe this. They have neither common sense nor sense of justice. At the FBI and the press, this is a national scandal. President Trump came in to drain the swamp. In a sense, this is the swamp in self-immolation. This is the establishment class in D.C. and of the press showing us who they really are and what they really believe in. No accountability, no honesty. Just stare everybody in the eye and say, what are you going to do about it? We're in charge. And the other people who are supposed to make sure that we can't do that, like President Trump, we're going after them. That's what's happening here. You have the biggest scandal in terms of politics, and in many ways, in terms of national security, because what undermines our elections and undermines our institutions is that now any president who comes into office who does not think that leftists throughout the bureaucracy are a threat to his or her presidency is being foolish. Not just the Russia collusion mess, Broussard, Strzok, Page, McCabe, Comey. Look at all these individuals. That's the top rung of the FBI. These are the people running the whole institution. Tens of thousands of FBI agents commanded by these people. And we're told that, oh no, there was a legitimate predicate. A legitimate predicate. You could only think that there was legitimate predicate for the investigation known as Crossfire Hurricane and particularly the FISA warrant of Carter Page if you're a moron. They're telling us openly now that they are completely and utterly stupid. And that is their defense. Because if we start to look a little bit deeper, we may find out that there's something else there. You will notice that yesterday in interviews, and Sancticomey is running around, and he's actually a great help to our side, the side of the truth seekers, because Sancticomey shows you how rotten the federal bureaucracy had become under the Obama administration and really for many years building up to that. Just how utterly partisan and disgraceful the top rung of federal law enforcement had become. And let's remember this, the most dangerous organization to your liberty in this country is not the NRA. I had to debate a lib last night on Fox News. The NRA talking, it's amazing. The NRA is such a boogeyman. It used to be Halliburton. This is just a thing that people say when they have nothing else to say. The biggest threat to your liberties is, in fact, a partisan federal law enforcement apparatus. That is scarier for you and for your ability to have your own thoughts, pursue your own destiny, pursue your own life, and have freedom than anything else in the federal government. It's not even close. And once we are told that we should be acclimated to this kind of partisanship, what's left after that? Oh no, unless they have a signed confession, I did this because I'm a hyper-partisan, pro-Hillary stooge. What are we told? Oh, that's right, we know now. Not explained why all these errors happened. Not explained, huh? Attorney General Barr, who they're all going to say is a Trump stooge, but it's not going to work. Not only is he a world-class legal mind, which anybody who's ever worked in D.C. in the upper reaches of the DOJ will admit is true, by the way, including honest Democrats. He was the Attorney General under George H.W. Bush. The guy's been in the game forever. He knows exactly what kind of swamp games are being played here. And that's why he's such a threat to the left. That's why they hate him now. They're going to, by the way, they're going to come after him with everything they have. I wouldn't be surprised if they had some emotionally disturbed person come forward and say, 40 years ago at a party, he made a move on me, and then I said no, and he, grabbed my behind or something. I mean, they'll make something up. Anything to take this guy down now. Anything. Because he is such a threat to the narrative. They're never going to recover. If we find out the truth, no serious person could watch CNN and think that they're seeing anything other than dishonest, propagandistic, overpaid, vain stooges. That is what the lineup is over there in prime time and throughout the day. Same thing at MSNBC, same thing with the New York Times editorial page, the Washington Post editorial page. These people have betrayed their charge of informing the public. They are propagandists without remorse. And that then brings me to the single most important hole in all of this. Not explained. The 17 major errors in the Carter Page FISA. I had a Democrat that I bumped into last night at Fox tell me that she still thinks that Carter Page is a traitor after I chatted with him a little bit, and still thinks that it was legitimate to investigate him. These people are insane. Well, what's it going to take? We have the Inspector General saying there's nothing to prove Carter Page was a Russian agent. In fact, he was really working for the U.S. government against the Russians, and then deep state, left-wing anti-Trumpers used the fact that in good faith, Carter Page was trying to help the United States government against a Russian counterintelligence threat as the basis for pretending he was a counterintelligence threat. But people still want to believe. They can't accept that they were so swindled. And they also can't accept that maybe all their hatred toward Trump, toward Carter Page, toward so many people in this saga was misplaced. Ultimately, though, I think it is about ego. Leftists love the pretense. They love to think of themselves as erudite, as brilliant, as worldly, as knowledgeable. And they've been swindled like silly little children with this Russia collusion mess. All of them. They don't want to believe that, though. They don't want to accept that this is reality. Not explained, they say. Somebody tell me how this works. You are a senior FBI agent who, by the way, also was one of the agents who tweeted "Viva la Resistance" in all those text messages that came out. But we're not supposed to believe he has a political bias, folks. Did you know that? Did anyone mention that in the media? We already know that this is one of the individuals who was part of the whole cabal of anti-Trumpers at the FBI. That guy decided to find out if Carter Page was being helpful to the CIA. And then they said, oh, actually, he's not being helpful. He is not, in fact, working for the side of the United States government. And this changed the information presented to the FISA court. Now, I need somebody to give me an explanation for how you could do that. That's not an error. That's not a typo. That's malicious. And it's maliciousness that we can point to and say, hold on a second. Is this just the one time that they got a little sloppy with the way they were stacking the deck? Is this just the one time when they thought they just pushed a little too far? And then you look backwards, you work backwards from this proposition. If it's not explained why all these errors happened. But this one seems to be inexplicable in a way that could only lead to one thing: bias against Trump. If this instance of changing what was in the FISA warrant on Carter Page was about bias against Trump, work backwards from that. Maybe all the other omissions, lack of checking the facts, lack of presenting contrary information. Maybe that's all bias too, friends. This is what Comey is concerned about. And this is why the Attorney General has come out and said, not so fast. We have somebody else looking at this. Comey yesterday, in one of his super smug interviews, said that the Attorney General, and he's trashing the Attorney General, by the way. The Attorney General is 10 times the legal mind and 10 times the ethical human being that James Comey has ever been. We all know that. Has Attorney General Barr ever been slapped down by his own institution for breaking clear regulation as part of a personal vendetta against the President of the United States? Because James Comey has. Let's remember the facts here. James Comey also lied to the American people. We will get into that. We have the proof. Do you know that MSNBC and CNN are not even running the hearing this morning? What does that tell you? They know. They've got to skip past this as fast. Just pretend that none of this happened, that there'll be no accountability, that nobody will ask any questions. How could they have gotten all this so wrong? Rachel Maddow's show has 4 million people watching this a night, all about Russia collusion and Kremlinology and all this stuff, all lunacy. The audience they've been made fools of. They don't understand this. They've been made fools of. They've been exploited. Their bias and political idiocy has been used against them. Or perhaps they just accept that they're going to be exploited in this way, and they don't care because it was entertaining while Rachel Maddow was pretending to present them with some complicated theory. But Comey lied, and there's more than just that. This isn't over yet. The Attorney General is going to make sure of it.
Investigate it to prove that it didn't happen. And then he says something that distracted me, because he said, if there's even a 1% chance my wife thinks that's true, that's terrible. And I remember thinking, how could your wife think there's a 1% chance you were with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow? I'm a flawed human being, but there's literally zero chance that my wife would think that was true. So what kind of marriage to what kind of man does your wife think there's only a 99% chance you didn't do that? And I said to him, sir, when he started talking about it, I may order you to investigate that. I said, sir, that's up to you, but you'd want to be careful about that because it might create a narrative that we're investigating you personally. And second, it's very difficult to prove something didn't happen.
Did you believe his denial?
Honestly, never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow in 2013. It's possible, but I don't know.
It's also possible that James Comey was peed on by prostitutes. I don't know. I wasn't there. Comey is scum. Let's continue with our exploration here. Former FBI Director James Comey, who you will recall was a hero, really the grand hero of the resistance against Trump for a long time. Comey is so ethical, bipartisan, served under multiple administrations of both parties. Oh, James Comey is fantastic. James Comey is an actual threat to your freedom. James Comey was somebody you should have been concerned about in the role that he had. They're always yelling about Trump and fascism. Trump has done nothing fascistic. James Comey, on the other hand, likes the Soviet method of let's dirty you up and then present you with information. And hey, nice presidency there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. As if that's not enough. Remember, he is the FBI. He was the FBI director. I am an FBI agent. Some of you will catch that. But he was the FBI director, and this is what he said. I think this was back in 2017. Remember, this whole review is of the FISA process, not the investigation origins of Crossfire Hurricane, although the Inspector General had decided to give a little bit of cover to his institution over that one. But here is what Comey said about that FISA process. Play 23.
have total confidence that the FISA process was followed and that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI. I think the notion that FISA was abused here is nonsense.
There you go. Former FBI director. The notion that FISA was abused is nonsense. I ask you, is Comey a moron or a liar? I actually don't think he's a moron. I just think he is a deeply insidious liar. Somebody who presents himself as a guardian of truth. It's very much like our media. They pretend that they're offering up objective information. They're informing the public. They play this very important role, but in reality, they are propagandists. And they hide behind this shield. Call it the fake tapper. They hide behind this shield of neutrality, of objectivity, so they can't really be criticized or challenged because they're just trying to present the facts to the people. Comey here has always done the same thing. Oh, this is about the institution, the FBI. We got to just play it straight. You know, James Comey always speaks to us the way a kind of annoying Cub Scout leader used to speak to me back in the day, a little bit too paternal, a little too like pat on the head. Oh, it's okay. Maybe one day you'll learn how to tie that knot. Except James Comey's a moron. James Comey is going around telling us things that we can check and see are not true. Now, maybe, again, I perhaps shouldn't say he's a moron. I think it's more just that he's caught here. Because yesterday, so he might have no choice in a sense. So now he's just going full propaganda, running around doing what he can. Because he also is going to need the left-wing media to rally to his side if and when the full truth of all of this comes out. Which, by the way, I think is very much that Brennan and Comey and McCabe, and perhaps Clapper too, really just concocted this bizarre theory and ran with it. And then used the dossier. It just was the poison that seeped through the top of the federal government. And anybody who wanted to believe, because they're such crybabies, that Hillary needed to be our president. That's really what they act like we could have had, Jesus as our president. Although, by the way, if you see, there's a poll out that most Democrats actually think that Obama was a better president than George Washington. So, I guess Jesus already was our president in a sense, because he's the greatest president in the history of the world. No one could ever be better. Wow. But they act like it was some terrible tragedy that the wildly corrupt and opportunistic and self-indulgent and self-dealing Hillary Clinton, who covered up for her sexual assaulting, philandering, lying, cheating disgrace of a husband, while he was president, by the way. I know some other presidents did some wilder stuff in their earlier days, but not in the Oval Office, for heaven's sakes. And yet, that poison of the dossier spread throughout the upper reaches of the federal government and gave an excuse to anyone who didn't believe it was possible that President Trump was going to win, that it couldn't be. This meant that there was some psychological escape hatch for those deep staters, whom I know very well because I used to work near them, the ones who used to complain about anyone making a joke about the greatness of Reagan as a Hatch Act violation, or the ones who would snicker and tell petty jokes about how stupid the president of the United States was when it was Bush before they would go in to brief him, because that used to happen. Or who would cover up for, say, Nancy Pelosi, finding out that the war in Iraq was going particularly well at one point, had turned around, less U.S. casualties, less Iraqi casualties, and she looked at it like we had told her that she wasn't getting any birthday presents this year. Yeah, those people, they are in the federal government. They exist, I know, because I saw them and I knew them. And some of those people took it upon themselves to try and destroy the president. And in the process, they have absolutely shaken the faith that any of us should have that we can trust the Department of Justice or the FBI in a politically sensitive matter to do the right thing. The FBI's defense, let's be very clear about this. The FBI, 17 major errors in the FISA report, omissions. If they were building a case for prosecution, the people that were involved would be disbarred, because they'd have to disclose this exculpatory. The same rules, in a sense, apply, different punishments in this case. penalties, punishments. Got a little caught up between the two there. But there's not really all that much accountability. There's been some accountability for McCabe. Comey got fired. One of the best things Trump has done since he was in office. Should have fired him day one. And Comey knew that, which is why he was trying to play this game of, I got this dossier here. I don't know about this. Does anyone not believe that the federal government, probably Clapper, maybe Comey, leaked to CNN that the dossier was briefed to the President of the United States to create this as a news story so then they could report on it without reporting it? This is a classic propaganda technique, by the way. Run it through somebody else as a cutout. That's what they did. I know propaganda. I studied it. I'm actually familiar with how this works at different governments. When you look at what other governments do and how they influence the process of public opinion with a hidden hand, with what you'd call black propaganda, which is where they're pretending that it comes from somewhere it doesn't. Right? There's gray propaganda where you don't know. It's just like leaflets dropped out of a plane or something. But then there's black propaganda, which is, this comes from this organization, but it actually comes from the government. Or this comes from the opposition, but it actually comes from the party in power. That's what we're talking about here in terms of the tactics that have been used. Lindsey Graham understands what's going on here. The Inspector General is testifying on Capitol Hill. As I said, CNN and MSNBC not carrying this one live. Nope. Other things. Hey, let's talk about there's a couple of ducklings that got lost from a local pond out in Tuscaloosa, and, fortunately, a zookeeper came over, and they'd rather talk about that. I don't want to talk about the Inspector General report. I'm amazed. I'm still seeing liberals pretending that this is anything other than devastating to their argument. Their only defense at this point is there were all of these lies that were circulating about Trump and the Trump campaign. There were all these lies. They're all lies. None of it has been true. Russia collusion, a lie. All the things that were being said in that dossier that were worth including in a dossier of that kind, I mean, they basically got the spellings of people's names right in the campaign. That's it. Everything else, a lie. And liberals are saying, see, it was a legitimate investigation. A legitimate investigation based entirely on lies. That is what they offer you. You're going to accept that? That's the new standard? These people are appalling. Simply appalling. Lindsey Graham understands that. Now, I mentioned to you the doctoring of information. How is this an error? How is this a mistake? It says not explained. Remember, that's what we can't find an explanation for it. But because we can't find an explanation, we don't know. This is just another version of what the libs do with jihadist terrorism. We may never know the real motive. I mean, the guy was running around with an Allahu Akbar t-shirt on, an I Heart ISIS on his backpack, but, maybe he was upset because he got stuck in traffic that day. We may never know the real motive. I mean, you could do this with anything. Never really know. Can't get inside his head. Well, explain to me what you think the motive is here. Play clip 21, if you would, please, producer Brandon.
When you read this report, what they find is that a lawyer supervising the FISA process at the FBI, according to Mr. Horowitz, doctored an email from the CIA to the FBI, and he's going to be referred for criminal prosecution. Why is that important? Carter Page, who's been on the receiving end of all this, the foundation to believe he was a foreign agent comes from a dossier that we'll talk about in a minute. In that dossier provided by Christopher Steele, and we'll talk about him in a minute, they claim that Carter Page meets with 3 people known to be Russians, Russian agents, people associated with Russia. Carter Page, while being wiretapped by his government, says, I don't know 2 of these people. And to this day, there is no proof that he ever met 2 of those 3.
To this day. So why was somebody referred for criminal prosecution? Lindsey Graham continues here. Play clip 22.
The third person, he says, I met him. I told the CIA about my meeting because I was a source for the CIA. So they would have you believe that Carter Page is working against our government, not with our government. So Carter Page in the summer of 2017 is trying to tell anybody and everybody, I was working with the CIA, I reported my contact with this person, and nobody believed him. The CIA had told the FBI it was true earlier, but it never made it through the system. Somebody got so rattled at the FBI, they asked Mr. Kleinsmith to check it out. He checks it out. He communicates with the CIA. Is Carter Page a source for you? In an email exchange, they say, yes, he is. What does Mr. Kleinsmith do? He alters the email to say, no, he's not. And you caught him.
How is that an error that somebody could make in good faith? You can't, there's no way, you can't even come up with an explanation other than this person understood. Remember, person had tweeted out, or texted out rather, not tweeted, Vive la Resistance. This person knew that the whole FISA on Carter Page that they had, if it turned out he was a government source, what's the claim going to be? That the Russians are running him as a double agent against the CIA? I mean, this is insane. But all of his contacts with Russians would be completely explicable, would be completely understandable in this context. And so they hid it. They hid something that would have deep sixed, that would have ended their entire fishing expedition against the Trump campaign. It was a willful act. And we're supposed to believe that this was just mistakes, just errors made here and there? No. I'm sorry. And I think Attorney General Barr knows that that's also not the case. You know what the fun thing is? Inspector General doesn't know what Barr knows. Comey doesn't know what Barr knows. And they're worried. And they should be. I want to note for you all there was a very important exchange yesterday where you had Comey say that maybe during one of his interviews, because he's going on a press blitz now to try to save whatever remnants of his reputation he thinks he has. I mean, he's about as honorable and decent as Michael Avenatti at this point. Somebody who the Democrats at one point were raising as a possible presidential contender. But he said, Barr is going to keep looking. Barr is going to keep trying to find things. And maybe, eventually he'll find some way to justify this. Oh, I think he will. Play a clip 2 here. Here's Comey trying to start the little war on Barr himself.
The Attorney General has to be the steward of an organization that's apolitical. So he has to be both a political appointee and a guardian of the apolitical nature of investigations. The Justice statute wears a blindfold because you cannot be peeking at your political boss or your friends when you're making decisions. It's certainly hard to explain a lot of his conduct over the last year as consistent with that role of balancing the political and the apolitical. He seems to have leaned on the political entirely.
I mean, the only reason really for him to make a statement and a commentary about the Inspector General report, as with Durham, is really to send a message to the president that, don't worry, we're still on this.
To his supporters, I know it looks like that you told whoppers to the American people about a vital institution for 2 years, but I got this. We're going to find something. We'll keep digging until we find something that justifies what you've been saying for 2 years. I don't think that's a role for the Attorney General of the United States.
You know why he's saying this? Because Durham is going to find something. He's going to find it. It's out there. Friends, they offer you no explanation. They offer you that this was just all a coincidence, that this just happened. It was just a bunch of oopsies. They tell you that the single most important, single biggest investigation, perhaps in the history of the FBI in many ways, was handled by people who are such abject morons that they neither have any sense of fairness nor their own procedures and rules. And that somehow, if they were trying to continue an investigation against a presidential campaign and then a president despite the evidence. If that was their goal, they managed to do it, but they managed to do it all by accident. It just happened that way. Or maybe there's something else here. I think we all know there's something else here. How did all of this get started? Who decided that they needed to even consider this crossfire hurricane investigation against Papadopoulos? Who was under investigation by federal authorities? We know that it was Flynn, it was Manafort, it was Papadopoulos, it was Carter Page. When did all of that begin, and how, and what stories were told? All we need, friends, is one email, one text message from one of these deep state conspirators that Durham is looking at, and the whole thing comes crashing down. Wait and see.